The last day of death row inmate John Geoghan, the sinister truth about Father. He was once a man of faith, a priest who preached forgiveness, compassion, and salvation. But behind the church doors, Father John Geoghan led a life of devastating betrayal. For more than 3 decades, he preyed upon the most vulnerable, children who trusted him, families who welcomed him. His crimes would go on to shake the very foundation of the Catholic Church and expose one of the darkest scandals in modern history. Now, after years behind bars, his final judgment came not from a courtroom, but from within the cold walls of a Massachusetts prison. In the next 24 hours, the man who once claimed to serve God would face a reckoning unlike any other. This is the final 24 hours of Father John Geoghan. If you want more powerful real-life prison documentaries like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what comes next. By 2002, Geoghan's name was known around the world. Newspapers carried his image daily, the once trusted priest now exposed as the central figure in the Boston clergy abuse scandal. Hundreds of victims came forward, lawsuits piled up, and for the first time, the public learned how deep the cover-up went. Internal church documents revealed that bishops had long known about Geoghan's behavior. Yet instead of removing him, they quietly transferred him, parish to parish, shielding the institution while more children suffered. When his secret files were finally made public, outrage erupted. It was no longer just about one man. It was about a system that allowed him to continue. In January 2002, Geoghan was convicted for assaulting a 10-year-old boy at a swimming pool decades earlier. The sentence, 9 to 10 years in prison. It was a fraction of what the victims had hoped for, a punishment for only one of many crimes. Still, for the first time, the priest was behind bars, stripped of his collar and his power. He entered MCI Concord, a medium-security prison in Massachusetts. There, he faced the reality of confinement and the fury of inmates who knew his past. Even in prison, John Geoghan remained a target. Many inmates despised him, not just for what he had done, but for what he represented. A fallen priest, a symbol of betrayal. Rumors spread that he was attacked, harassed, even humiliated by both inmates and guards. Some reports claimed that waste had been smeared on his bedding, that taunts followed him wherever he went. Eventually, prison officials decided to move him for his own protection. In late 2002, he was transferred to Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center, a level 6 maximum security facility known for housing some of Massachusetts' most dangerous offenders. There, he was placed in J1, the Special Housing Unit, a sterile, tightly controlled section reserved for high-risk or vulnerable inmates. Among its residents were gang leaders, informants, and notorious offenders, a mix that made for an uneasy peace. For Geoghan, this isolation offered a strange sense of safety. Within his small, single-man cell, he spent his days reading scripture, writing letters, and praying. Despite his crimes, he reportedly continued to lead brief prayers and quote verses aloud, clinging to his faith even as the world turned away. But what Geoghan didn't know was that his time in J1 was running out, and someone else in the unit had already chosen him as a target. The day began like any other. At 8 a.m., guards conducted the morning count. 26 men, 26 cells. Breakfast came through the slots. Small trays passed through steel doors. The block was quiet. Across the tier in cell 21, a man named Joseph Lee Druce, a self-proclaimed neo-Nazi serving a life sentence, watched closely. Druce had returned from solitary confinement just the day before. For 2 weeks, he had been isolated for attacking another inmate. Now, he was back, and he had a plan. According to investigators, Druce had spent weeks studying the guards' rotations, timing their movements, and preparing a makeshift weapon. His hatred of Geoghan wasn't personal, it was symbolic. He told others he wanted to make an example out of the former priest, to protect children in his own twisted sense of justice. By late morning, Druce saw his opportunity. At 11:40 a.m., one of the 2 guards on duty, Officer Kasparak, left the unit to assist with the lunch line on another floor. Only one officer, Daniel Ladigan, remained in the J1 block, responsible for the entire section. When Ladigan opened the cell doors so inmates could return their meal trays, Druce slipped through. As Geoghan turned toward his cell, he saw a familiar face, a man he once considered calm, even polite. He didn't flinch. He didn't scream. Not yet. The cell door closed behind them. At first, no one noticed. The only sound in the block was the dull hum of fluorescent lights. Moments later, a janitor walking past cell 2 caught sight of something unusual, movement that didn't look right. Through the narrow window, he saw Geoghan pinned on the floor, another man on top of him. He froze, uncertain of what to do, then hurried toward the officer's desk. By the time Ladigan reached the door, it was too late. Druce had jammed the locking mechanism from inside using a torn piece of a book and a toothbrush, trapping the guards outside. Inside, chaos unfolded. Druce had tied Geoghan's hands with a t-shirt, gagged him with a pillowcase, and wrapped a sock around his neck, twisting it tight, using it like a garrote. The officer called for backup, code 99, the highest emergency signal. But it took 10 agonizing minutes for help to arrive. Through the glass, guards could see Druce continuing the assault. At one point, he climbed onto the bunk and leapt down onto Geoghan's chest, breaking several ribs. The other inmates watched in silence, some horrified, others indifferent. When the response team finally forced open the door, Druce looked up calmly and said, "I just saved your kids from being hurt." Medical staff rushed into the cell, cutting away the restraints. They tried CPR, used a defibrillator, but it was no use. Geoghan's body was limp, his pulse gone. He was transported to Leominster Hospital, where doctors pronounced him dead at 1:17 p.m. Cause of death, strangulation and blunt force trauma. 14 ribs broken, 1 lung punctured. When news of his death spread, reactions were mixed. Some of his victims expressed relief. Justice in their eyes had finally arrived. Others felt cheated. They had waited years to see him stand before them, to hear him admit what he'd done. Now, that moment would never come. Even within the church, there was silence. Some saw his death as a tragedy, others as divine justice. But for the victims, closure remained complicated. His crimes had set off a reckoning that changed the Catholic Church forever. Hundreds of priests removed, billions paid in settlements, and countless lives still struggling to heal. As for his killer, Joseph Druce, he later claimed he had acted on impulse after hearing Geoghan boast about his crimes. Investigators, however, painted a different picture, a calculated attack driven by hatred and ego. Druce wanted notoriety, and now he had it. In 2006, Druce was convicted of first-degree homicide and sentenced to life without parole, again. He remains in custody to this day. As the final seconds of George Stinney Jr.'s life ticked away, a haunting silence fell over the chamber, a silence that still echoes through history. Decades later, his name would be cleared, but no apology or verdict could ever return the life that was so swiftly taken. George's story reminds us of how fragile justice can be when prejudice and fear outweigh truth. It challenges us to question not only the past, but also the fairness of the systems that continue to shape lives today. If this story moved you, remember, it's not just history. It's a lesson that still matters. Innocence, justice, and humanity must never be rushed or ignored. Thank you for watching. If you want to uncover more forgotten cases and the untold final hours behind prison walls, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us keep these stories alive.